So hello, everybody. Thank you for being here for our closing convening. This is going to be an opportunity for you to hear some federal priorities, what's going on in the next year, and also to hear about our notice of proposed rulemaking for the Office of Child Care and from the Office of Head Start. So I'm going to let each person do their own introductions as they speak to you. And then after they speak, there'll be a chance for questions. And the questions can be about anything you heard, but I also told them I'm putting them on the spot, and you could ask any other question that you didn't hear. So if you have a question or a comment, you'll be able to go to the mic, or we'll bring the mic to you, and you can ask your questions. And then after that part is finished, I'll do some final closing remarks and send you off home. So without further ado, I'm going to let Jamila Smith get us started.
Certainly. Well, hello. Good morning. Okay, I think some of you all were in my session earlier this week, so let's do it again. We are early learners. We are in the spirit of call and response, so good morning. Good morning. All right, awesome. So I am not Deputy Secretary Adhikar, but I do bring you greetings on her behalf. As the senior official at the U.S. Department of Education for Early Learning, she is often tasked with responding to a variety of White House inquiries around early learning, which is what we want her to do. We want an administration focused on early learning. So she is unable to be here with us today, but I do bring you greetings on her behalf. I am Jamila Smith. I serve as the Director for the Office of Innovation and Early Learning Programs at the U.S. Department of Education. And I'm excited to continue this partnership with HHS, not specifically just on the PDG B-5 grant program and its implementation, but also looking at how our work goes beyond that one grant program. Looking at how we're continuing to, let's make sure I can advance slides. No, I'm not. Oh, okay, it's moving. Thank you so much, friends in the back. But also thinking about how we're building connections to create seamless transitions from birth to childcare to early learning to latter grades of school. At the Department of Education, we are having some exciting progress on connecting early years and early grades, and I'm happy to share some of that with you today. Last January, the Department of Education launched an initiative called Raise the Bar that frames the work of the department to support students' elementary and secondary school experiences in three major focus areas. The first being achieving academic excellence, which is focused on accelerating learning and supporting lost instructional time as a result of the pandemic, with a specific focus on literacy and math and rigorous learning standards. The early learning focus area is closely nestled within that particular focus area. We're also looking at boldly improving learning conditions by eliminating workforce shortages and ensuring students have certified teachers that have professional learning opportunities and competitive salaries. The third part of this umbrella is the opportunities for students to be multilingual, or specifically focusing on career pathways for global engagement. Our secretary has often called being a multilingual learner a superpower on our path to remaining to be globally competitive. The department's early learning agenda is a pre-K-3 framework and is kindergarten-centered. Let's make sure. There we go. So there's a two-track approach to supporting our early learning success. The first being building kindergarten as a more sturdy bridge, and the second is expanding access to high-quality preschool. At the department, we're using a variety of levers to support this agenda. We're using the bully pulpit, in which we're having senior leaders who are former educators, former principals and superintendents travel the country to expand the messaging around early learning. It's also ensuring that the department recognizes that early learning is all of our work. It's not just the work of Deputy Assistant Secretary Adhikar, myself, Tammy Proctor, Ruben Vasquez, Kim Mitchell, or Brenda Wilkins. It's all of our work at the department to ensure the great success of early learning. It's also around technical assistance and ensuring opportunities such as the Kindergarten as a Sturdy Bridge community of practice, which I'll talk a bit about on the next slide. It's also looking at the grant funding that we put out, not just discretionary grant funding, but also formula grant funding, and how we're supporting states and districts and thinking differently about how they're using these streams of funding to support early learning, but also what's the messaging from the department around using funding streams like Title I to support early learning. It's also about research and working with our Institute of Educational Sciences to ensure their work within the early learning network is clear and being made readily available to the field. So you all know why we focus on preschool. We can reduce gaps before kindergarten entry. More high-need students can benefit from high-quality early learning experiences before they begin kindergarten. Children from historically marginalized groups, rural areas, those living in poverty, and those furthest from opportunity. Districts can play a leadership role in expanding access to preschool in both school and community-based settings by using Title I, partnerships with Head Start colleagues, and other resources. We also focus on kindergarten. So it's pretty clear why we're focusing on preschool, but why are we focusing on kindergarten? We focus on kindergarten because it is the first place at-scale early learning opportunity in a school setting to provide the supports and interventions needed to assure on-track development. Kindergarten is an inflection point, a time of significant change in a young learner's life. We focus on kindergarten because as a consequence, it's predictive of which children will experience early school success and which will not. Because kindergarten presents an important opportunity to partner with parents and families to build the relationships, the routines, the habits that are essential to family engagement, everyday attendance, not early day, but everyday attendance for little people, and early school success. Now, I mentioned the kindergarten as a sturdy bridge learning community. Toward the end of the summer, Secretary Cardona, during his back-to-school bus tour, announced the Kindergarten Sturdy Bridge Learning Community and invited states to partner with the department in this community of practice to allow them to share and learn from each other, highlight what's working for all of us. The intention is to highlight the pieces of the puzzle that support a seamless connection from pre-K to third grade and beyond. It could be an effective transition program. It can be PLC supporting virtual alignment. It could be innovative pre-service preparation programs, developmentally appropriate practices for early learning to support pre-K-3 alignment. Some states are looking at the science of reading and sort of some of those appropriate practices there. It can also be effective multilingual learning. There are a variety of conversations that states are having together, and the goal is to eventually turn to the public and be able to share some of those promising practices, innovations, and bright spots that are happening. Because we know, similar to this convening, it's one thing to hear from the feds in terms of policy, but you really want to hear from your peers in terms of implementation. Where is it going well? How can I do it? How can we beg, borrow, and steal from one another to make this work in our respective jurisdictions? So as I said, we have 17 states who are participating, but we also have a host of states who have invited their local partners, their districts, to participate. So we have a two-track approach where we have state teams, but we also have district teams. So I'm hoping that many of you see your states present and can go back and inquire more about what your state is doing within the community of practice. Another administration priority is focused on elevating dual language learners and using an asset mindset as we engage and reference this community. There is a plethora of data and just brain development and science that speaks to what happens when children learn more than one language. This administration is taking a more active stance and ensuring equitable access to early learners, a more racially and linguistically diverse educator workforce, and ultimately ensuring that there's quality bilingual education for all, not just for our native students, but also supporting non-native students in becoming multilingual. Here's a quick resource from our partners at the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition. There are several resources here to support states and districts and other resource providers. Yesterday, they held a webinar on their family engagement toolkit, or their family toolkit, rather. The recording should be out in a few days, so wanting to provide that link in case folks are interested in accessing that. Lastly, I just want to say a quick thank you. I want to say a quick thank you to Deputy Assistant Secretary Ham for her leadership and her vision and the fortitude that it takes to do this work at her level. We have a true early learning, early care champion and Deputy Assistant Secretary Ham, and I just want to say thank you for your partnership. I also want to say thank you to the PDG team. Richard, I know he is all around. I can't even point him out, but Richard, I just want to say thank you to Richard, Judy, Becky, the full team, our MSGTA partners, but also thank you as a mom. The pictures that you see here are actually my children. This is my son in his early care setting. That's actually his preschool teacher. I do have authority to use that photo. I've used it several times. And then that's him and his twin sister graduating from their preschool setting. So I just want to say thank you so much from a mom's standpoint for all the work that you all do in your respective jurisdictions. It truly, truly makes a difference in setting all of our kids up for success.
Thank you, Jamila. I love it when we get to look at pictures of people's kids. So I'm often last at conferences. I don't really know why, but I'm used to people feeling like, maybe it's time to get home to my family. I got my suitcase with me. I checked into my flight. I'm kind of ready to go home to my dog, my cat, my kids, etc. So if you're feeling like that, it is okay. You've had a lot of information thrown at you in the last few days, but just want to thank you all for sticking it out and sticking it with us. We will try to make this session on federal priorities, which is maybe not the most exciting topic at face value, but we're going to try to make it as exciting and engaging as possible. But I also wanted to just keep on the thank you train. It is not an easy time to be in early childhood, and it has not been an easy time to be in early childhood for several years now. You all are drinking from a fire hose. You're dealing with a workforce crisis, a mental health crisis, federal funding kind of going up and down, and that's not easy. But yet here you are, and all week I've been getting texts from my team, emails saying, you wouldn't believe what this state is doing. You wouldn't believe what this state has been able to do with the PDG funding or the ideas that were generated in this session. So there is so much work going on with not a ton of money. And that's because you all bring your ingenuity, your commitment, your work ethic to your jobs every day. So I want to just start by, it's not easy to thank yourself. I don't think we're good as a field at thanking ourselves, but give yourselves a round of applause. We're going to talk a little bit more about what we're trying to do at the federal level, some of the work we're doing both as we think about the future and the progress we're trying to make here and now, but really see you all as partners and subject matter experts. So I hope as we're kind of sharing more with you today, it'll spark some ideas about lessons learned you can share with us and things that you might bring back. So I'm going to start just talking a little bit about who we are and what it is we do. As Jamila said, I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Early Childhood Development at ACF. It's a really long title. You don't have to remember it. It is true in DC, the longer your title, the less important you are, so you really don't need to remember it. But at ACF, we administer 4 early childhood funding streams. PDG, Birth to 5, hopefully you're familiar with. If not, you're in the wrong room. Tribal home visiting, and then Head Start and Child Care, or the Child Care and Development Block Grant, or the Child Care and Development Fund, pick your title. And collectively, this is about $22 billion in early childhood funding that goes out to states, tribes, territories, and communities across the country. So all told, about 1 in every $3 to $5 that's in early childhood is a dollar that comes from the Administration for Children and Families. So our goal is really to figure out if we have between a 20 and 33% stake in the early childhood sector, how are we using those dollars to be most effective for children, for families, and for early care and education providers? And we really see you all as partners in how we do that work. So we have, as the Biden-Harris administration, as we kind of implement these 4 programs and this $22 billion, we are also very much thinking about the future. We all know that it's a long process that comes with policymaking. We kind of start with an idea, and it can be years and sometimes, unfortunately, even decades before legislation passes and we see the major policy changes we need. But what the administration has proposed most recently is a $600 billion investment in early childhood. And that is the largest ever proposal we've ever seen. It's $600 billion over 10 years. It is designed to make childcare affordable to all families across the country. So we would see a massive increase in the families that get childcare assistance. We would also be looking to wages and increasing quality so that the landscape of early childhood really changes in this country. And there's also a proposal to make preschool universal in communities across the country. So it really is a comprehensive birth to 5 early care and education approach. It is a vision that we are putting out there that we are encouraging Congress to pass. It's something that we know is needed. We know when we see the challenges in the current system, we need a major federal investment to make it work. And we really see PDG as closely aligned to this goal. So it's rare in early childhood that we have money that is flexible. And what PDG allows us to do is to test out some of these ideas, test out some of these notions, build some of that groundwork so that when the time comes, we are really ready to make a major investment in early childhood. Oops. So in the Office of Early Childhood Development, in collaboration with the Office of Head Start and the Office of Child Care, we've identified 9 priorities. And these are places where this is our vision for what early care and education should look like and where we want to make progress. Sometimes that progress is going to be incremental. Sometimes that progress is going to allow us to grow by leaps and bounds. But when I look at this list and when I hear what you all are doing in your states, there's so much alignment. When I think about the workforce, with mental health, engaging people with lived experience, working with tribes at the state level, all of those things just map on so beautifully that it reinforces to me that we have really identified some of the places where we need to be partners in helping move this forward so that you all can do some of the important work in the state level. I wanted to highlight just some of the things we've done in the federal space in the last few years. Some of you might have heard of the American Rescue Plan Act. We have, at this point, distributed grants to states that have in turn used that money to essentially rescue the childcare sector. That supported 650,000 childcare workers that received some form of increased compensation. We've released sub-regulatory guidance on how you can use federal funds to improve the early childhood workforce, to improve compensation. We launched a national early care and education workforce center. And just last week, we released a joint statement on inclusion for children with disabilities. So as I said, we are continuously working to try to make that incremental progress at the same time as we call on Congress to make a major investment. And part of this work is really led by an executive order that President Biden signed in April, focused on increasing access to high-quality care and supporting caregivers. So we have a lot of work that's really centered around some of the deliverables in this executive order. And again, this was an announcement by the president, a call to almost every federal agency that we're going to continue to make progress, even as we call on Congress to make that investment in early care and education. So some of the specific things we were asked to do at HHS were around reducing childcare costs, making Head Start and childcare more accessible, improving compensation, and addressing mental health for the early childhood workforce. So all of the work that we're doing around mental health, around the workforce, is really in service of this larger vision in the administration to take every opportunity, whether that's at USDA, whether that's at Veterans Affairs, whether that's partnering with the Department of Education on an inclusion statement, to really use the full force of the federal government to improve the quality of childcare and support the people who do this work. All right. So one of the major ways that we are accomplishing some of our goals and some of those priorities I shared is through issuing new regulations in Head Start and child care. That is the bulk of our ACF early childhood funding, is through child care and Head Start. We have 2 regulations that my colleagues are gonna talk a little bit more about today. The Head Start Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, that's what NPRM stands for. We love acronyms. Basically, it means we're telling the public, this is what we're proposing. You have 60 days to comment on it. I don't read all those comments. Lindsay and her team have to read your comments. We respond to your comments, and then we issue a final rule. And once the final rule is out, it becomes law. So these are big changes, and you all know, as people who work in early childhood systems, if you do something in one side of this sector, it affects everybody. So if we're talking about wages in Head Start, it's not like people just go into the Head Start workforce. They are part of the early care and education workforce. Similarly, there are things in mental health. There's some really important changes that we want you all to leave with a really good understanding of. And you have until January 19th to go to the Federal Register and comment on this rule. And we want you to know that these are changes that are out there and can affect you. There are, as you all know, very high turnover rates in Head Start right now. it's been a long time in coming, but we really feel like we need to make a strong statement that Head Start is the gold standard in early care and education, and that includes higher wages. So this is what we proposed. Like I said, we're taking public comment, and Lindsay is going to talk more about what's in that rule, but very much want you all to leave with a good understanding of that. And then we also have a proposed rule in childcare. The public comment period actually closed over the summer. So now we are reviewing all of the comments that we received. We received comments from a lot of state lead agencies, and we are developing a final rule that we will put out next year. So there are provisions in there that would lower costs, increase childcare options, firm up the financial underpinning that the subsidy provides for early care and education providers. So we also want you all to have a really firm understanding of some of the changes that could be coming in childcare with the final rule. I'm not going to spend that much time on this slide, but sufficient to say, our proposed rules are really about taking those priorities and implementing them in a way that provides consistency and longevity for some of the changes that we know are needed in both childcare and Head Start. So now, like I said, we're going to go into a pretty in-depth review of what's in these regulations or these proposed regulations so that you all know some of the changes that could be coming to the early care and education systems in your state. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Andrew Williams, who's the Director of Policy Planning and Data in our Office of Child Care, and Andrew will be followed by Lindsay Hutchinson, who's the Team Lead for Policy and Planning in the Office of Head Start. So Andrew.
Thank you. It's really exciting to be here to share some information about our proposed rule. I'm Andrew Williams, as Katie said, the Division Director for Policy, Data, and Planning in the Office of Child Care, which is, I think, is one of those long titles that Katie was talking about. But as Katie said, we published a notice of proposed rulemaking July 13th in the Federal Register, and the comment period closed August 28th. And I'd like to acknowledge the Office of Child Care team led by Megan Campbell that worked on that proposed rule and is now working on the final rule, and also our director, Dr. Ruth Friedman, as well as Deputy Assistant Secretary Katie Ham, who really provided the leadership for the rule and are shepherding it through the clearance process, which is no easy task in federal government. The main goals of the NPRM were to lower family cost for families that are enrolled in the Child Care and Development Fund so that child care is more affordable. As you know, for many families, child care is a significant financial burden and can be a barrier or disincentive to work or participating in training and education. We also wanted to increase parents' child care options to ensure meaningful parental choice, to make it faster and easier for families to enroll in the child care program, and so that families can begin receiving services more timely. Also, to improve payment practices for child care providers to more closely reflect practices in the private sector. Increasing providers' willingness to participate in the Child Care and Development Fund, again, resulting in more options for families. And to promote more stable child care operations. As you know, many providers operate on slim margins and have been struggling in the aftermath of the pandemic, particularly with the current national workforce shortage. This slide provides an overview of the major proposals in the NPRM, and I'll be talking about each of these in more detail in a few minutes. But for now, I wanted to draw to your attention to the fact that some of the proposals are requirements that states will have to adopt, while others are encouragements. And the goal of the encouragements is to provide clarity that these policies and practices are allowable, and also to make it easier for states to adopt them. So the comment period has closed. We received over 1,600 comments from individuals, providers, national and state organizations, state CCDF lead agencies that administer the program, and I see a number of you in the room here today, as well as tribal entities and other commenters. The vast majority of the comments were very supportive of the proposals. They validated the benefits for children, families, and providers, and expressed appreciation for the efforts to make childcare more affordable, to help stabilize childcare, and to value childcare providers, making progress towards sustainable wages and payment practices that value the work. Each major proposal in the NPRM had much more support than opposition. More state CCDF lead agencies, which are the folks that are on the ground actually with the experience of actually implementing the program, more supported than opposed each of the major proposals. Some supporters expressed concerns about potential unintended consequences without additional resources, and stressed the need for long-term funding for childcare, which is really beyond the scope of the NPRM, but is obviously important. And as Katie mentioned, the administration has proposed large funding increases for CCDF. The commenters also said that implementation timelines need to be a consideration, that it takes time for states to implement some of these proposals, including time to work with their state legislatures and implement IT changes. This slide provides some excerpts from just a few of the comments. We wanted to show these to you to kind of bring to life the comments and give you a flavor of the positive tone that the supporters had for some of the proposals. They said that it was game-changing, that these were positive steps forward. They would remedy some of the systemic challenges that have impacted both families and providers. If you're interested in seeing more of the public comments, they're all posted and publicly available on the website, regulations.gov. So now I'm going to walk through each of the major proposals in the NPRM and give you a sense of the comments that we received on the proposals. The first, the NPRM proposes to prohibit states from imposing family co-payments above 7% of family income, because that's a barrier to access for child care. As most of you probably know, families under CCDF are generally required to make a co-payment along with the subsidy that they receive. By capping co-payments at 7%, this would benefit families in the 37 states that currently allow co-payments above 7% of income, and would improve family well-being. Most of the comments that we received on this proposal were largely supportive and validated that child care costs can act as a barrier to access and to family economic stability. Some commenters recommended a cap that was even lower than 7%. A few commenters suggested more research was needed, and there were a few commenters that opposed the proposal. Next, in the NPRM, we proposed that states would have to pay child care providers prospectively before services were delivered, and this would remove what's currently an option to pay providers retroactively within 21 days. The goal here is to improve childcare operational stability and to incentivize childcare providers to accept families receiving subsidies. Currently, about 45 states provide reimbursement rather than paying prospectively. Most commenters supported this proposal, recognizing its importance to providers and that it would increase parent options. They affirmed that prospective payments are the norm in the private market, that most childcare providers require payment upfront. In their comments, NAEYC cited a survey which found 77% of providers stated that they require prospective payment for their private paying families. Some commenters noted that this would require changes to upgrade IT systems, and state procurement laws might require some additional logistics, but there was very little outright opposition. Some commenters did suggest that prospective payment was not a standard for family, friend, and neighbor care. Next, the proposed rule would require states to pay child care providers based on children's enrollment rather than their attendance. This would help stabilize child care provider operations, make it easier for providers to accept subsidies, and increase parent options. Currently, there are about 20 states that pay based on attendance rather than enrollment. There were a number of states that switched to paying based on enrollment during the pandemic in order to stabilize the market, and that's momentum we would like to continue. Childcare, as you know, has many fixed costs, including staff, rent, utilities, and those costs have to be paid on any given day, regardless of whether a child shows up on any given day. So most of the comments on this provision supported the proposal, noting its importance to child care providers and confirming that it was paying based on enrollment was standard practice for private pay. There was very little opposition to the proposal. We also proposed that states provide some child care services through grants or contracts, including for infants and toddlers, children with disabilities, and non-traditional hour care. And this is providing services through grants and contracts rather than through vouchers, which is how the majority of subsidies are currently delivered. Currently, only about 10 states provide any services through grants or contracts. But we think grants or contracts are important because they increase childcare supply and parents' choices. Parents can't use a childcare voucher if there isn't care available in the community. Grants and contracts provide more stable funding that can build supply and also increase quality. Most of the comments on the proposal were very positive for these reasons. There were a few commenters that opposed. There were some that recommended we define how much of use of grants and contracts was required. Some commenters wanted more flexibility about which populations would be covered by the grants and contracts, and some wanted less flexibility. So now I'm going to switch to talking about the optional policies. And again, here the goal is to provide clarity that the policies are allowable and to make it easier for states to adopt them. The first is the NPRM would make it easier for states to waive copays, the family copayments, for families with incomes between 100 and 150% of the federal poverty level, and families with children with disabilities. The existing regulations already address waiving copayments for families below poverty and for children who are in need of protective services. So this would add additional flexibility or encouragement to allow waiving copays for additional families. This reduces the cost of childcare for more families and increases access and improves family well-being. The vast majority of commenters were supportive of this provision as a way to improve childcare affordability. Some commenters recommended a higher income threshold for waiving copayments or allowing states to waive copays for all families. Commenters also recommended additional categories of populations that they thought should be considered for waiving copayments, including child care workers, families experiencing homelessness, and teen parents. We also had a proposal encouraging states to pay providers based on the state-established payment rate, even if it was higher than what the provider charges private pay families. Currently, some states cap subsidy payments at the amount that the provider charges private pay parents rather than paying the full payment rate that the state has set. So we think that paying the established subsidy rate instead stabilizes childcare operations, increases quality, and incentivizes providers to participate in the subsidy program. There was strong support for this proposal because of these impacts. We also had a proposal, which is the last one I'm going to mention, clarifying that CCDF federal funds are allowable for up to 3 months of presumptive eligibility prior to full documentation and verification of eligibility, except in cases of fraud. So this will increase parent access to child care assistance and improve family well-being by making sure that families can start receiving services earlier rather than having to wait for what in some states can be a lengthy verification process of eligibility. There was strong support for this proposal due to its reduced burden on families. It will increase access to child care assistance and better support employment for families. We've already seen some states starting to move in this direction, so we're excited about that. And finally, just want to wrap up by saying, as Katie mentioned, we are working on a final rule, which is the next step, and we're aiming to publish on that in the spring of 2024. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay so we can hear more about Head Start's proposed rule.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you today to talk more about our Notice of Proposed Rulemaking that the Office of Head Start recently published in the Federal Register. My name is Lindsay Hutchison, and I am part of the policy team in the Office of Head Start. So before I start, I'm just curious, are there Head Start folks in the room? Any? Yeah, a few? All right. I feel like we probably have a few PDG folks. All right, a lot. And childcare administrators? All right. I am so happy that there's such a diverse audience of early childhood stakeholders and leaders here today while we were talking about these important policies that coming out of the Administration for Children and Families. So I, at the staff level, co-led the development of this rule along with my colleague, Office of Head Start colleague, Kelsey McKee. And I cannot tell you how excited we are to get this rule out. It was a long time in the making. We collaborated with a large number of colleagues and experts across the Office of Head Start and the Office of Early Childhood Development to get this content put together. And I am eternally grateful to a few key leaders that ensured this rule could get out, including our Office of Head Start Director, Kari Garvin, who isn't here today. He's in California doing information sessions on our NPRM, Colleen Rathgeb, and in particular, Katie Ham, who I cannot even tell you the amount of time Katie spent making sure we could get this rule published. So we are so glad to get to this moment. So the rule is entitled Supporting the Head Start Workforce and Consistent Quality Programming. It was published on November 20th in the Federal Register. The public comment period is open for 60 days, so that closes on January 19th. We have a few comments trickling in, and I really do encourage you to take a closer look at it and send us your comments through the Federal Register. So we know the thrust of this rule has a few different areas I'm going to talk about. So we really know that many of our Head Start programs, but it's not just a Head Start issue, also other early childhood programs across the country have been struggling for quite a while now to recruit and retain qualified staff. And we know that the COVID-19 pandemic really brought a lot of those challenges to light and made this situation worse. And we know that even our fully staffed programs are having challenges with retention of staff. We know we are losing staff to other better paying jobs with better benefits. And we know that our staff are really committed to the work in Head Start and other early childhood programs, and they really value that work and find it rewarding. But as I don't have to tell you all, it's really challenging work, and we know that the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic have made that work more challenging for the staff, particularly those staff working with the children and families on a regular basis, because we in Head Start are really serving those children and families that are furthest from opportunity. And so over the past decade, we've seen a huge growth in the qualifications of our Head Start staff since Head Start was last reauthorized in 2007. But as I'm sure you know, we have not seen compensation follow suit. So the changes we are proposing in this NPRM really seek to make significant updates to our Head Start program performance standards. So those standards are the requirements that all of our programs have to meet to be delivering high-quality Head Start services. And with these changes, we are proposing to really support and stabilize the Head Start workforce, as well as improve those early education and comprehensive services that our programs are known for. And so I've already said a little bit about kind of the thrust of this rule, that we really do want to, we are hoping and aiming that these changes, if enacted, would really help programs support and build and stabilize their workforce for years to come, and really improve and continue to build on those high-quality services that Head Start programs are known for. We know our programs are struggling to keep staff, and that turnover is at its highest point for Head Start in nearly 2 decades. But we know it's not all just about compensation. There are other things we can focus on as well. So I'll talk more about some of the other proposals we're also focusing on in this NPRM. We do propose a number of other areas for quality improvement. And collectively, comprehensively, we believe these proposed changes, if implemented, would help our programs to really effectively and equitably meet the evolving needs of the communities that they serve. So these are proposed changes. They are not final yet. And we really spent a lot of time developing these proposed changes based on research and data, based on years of hearing from the field, from folks like you, from our Head Start program staff and families, from other experts, and really believe that what we are proposing is the direction the program needs to move. So we are really seeking, we think we've got it right in this NPRM, but we also really value the point of the public comment period, and we need to hear from you. We need to hear what we got right and where there might be areas that we should do something different. And in the meantime, our Head Start program performance standards that are current do remain in effect until a final rule is issued. So we think of our proposed rule, the proposals in this rule is contained in 3 big buckets. The first is really, as I was mentioning, about supports for the workforce. And I'll speak more about each of these in detail in just a minute. The second bucket is about really improving and better integrating mental health supports throughout our programs. And then we have a third bucket with a variety of other quality improvements to really improve those comprehensive services that our programs provide. And so before I dive into the first set of changes, I want to just speak a little bit more about why we are so focused on the workforce. So when we think about supports for the workforce in this rule, our underlying goal here is really to think about what does the workforce need to make Head Start programs a positive, empowering place to work, a place where they want to come to work every day, a place where they feel they can do their best to serve the children and families in our programs. And so we know one big aspect of that is wages. And so before I talk about those proposals, I just wanted to share a little bit more data that, as I mentioned before, our wages that our teachers in particular, our education staff in our classrooms make do not reflect the qualifications and responsibilities they hold or the important jobs that they are doing. So as of 2022, for instance, about 70% of our Head Start preschool teachers have a bachelor's degree. And however, as you can see on the slide, they earn on average about $39,000 annually in 2022. This is well below what a preschool teacher in a public school setting earns on average. You can see there's about $53,000, and also well below what a kindergarten teacher earns on average, about $65,000. Despite the fact that our Head Start preschool teachers are doing that really critical work, very similar to preschool teachers, similar to what kindergarten teachers are doing. And so we know that this is just not sustainable going forward. And so what we are proposing here is a set of, first for wages, a set of interrelated standards to improve wages across the board for our program staff. And we really want to promote those competitive wages that reflect the qualifications, responsibilities, and experience that our staff have. And so we are proposing that by August 2031, first, that programs must make progress to pay parity for our Head Start education staff with kindergarten to 3rd grade teachers. And we are defining that progress to pay parity. What the requirement is that by 2031, they must demonstrate progress to pay parity by paying education staff an annual salary that is at least comparable to public school preschool teachers. And so when I say education staff in this proposal, we are talking about those staff who work every day as part of their main job responsibilities with children. So we're talking about our Head Start preschool teachers, assistant teachers, our early Head Start teachers, our home visitors, and our family child care providers. And then our next wage standard as part of this set is we are proposing, we assume most of our programs, similar to any business, have a pay structure already in place for their staff, but we are proposing that they must take a look at that pay structure and update it or enhance it and ensure that it really, it covers all staff in the program and that it really takes into account the responsibilities, qualifications, and experience of the staff. And the goal is that this, doing these enhancement and updates will really promote competitive wages for staff across the board. We are also proposing that the minimum pay for all staff must be at least sufficient to cover basic cost of living. So we think about this as the floor of that pay structure, and we are trying to lift that floor up and ensure that all staff get paid a sufficient wage. And in the preamble, we describe that as at least $15 an hour in most areas of the country. And then last for our wage standards, we really want to ensure wages are comparable across Head Start preschool and early Head Start teachers. So next, we know that wages are not everything and that there are other aspects that are also important for supporting the workforce. So we propose a number of things to strengthen benefits for our workforce. And so I'm going to focus on, most of our benefit proposals focus on our full-time staff, which we define as those who are working at least 30 hours or more per week during the program year. So we are proposing that those staff must have access to health insurance, either through an employer-sponsored plan or through connections to a plan in the marketplace. They must have access to short-term, free or low-cost behavioral health services, and they must have paid sick, personal, and family leave. For part-time staff, we are proposing that programs must at least connect those employees to health insurance options in the marketplace, ensure they have that coverage. And then for any staff who are eligible, we are also proposing that programs must connect staff to childcare subsidies if they're eligible for that, or to public service loan forgiveness if they have student debt. And as I was mentioning before, we know that compensation isn't everything, that what also matters is that work environment. And we know, as I was saying before, that the environments that our staff are working in can be very stressful, can be very challenging despite really enjoying that work. So we also want to ensure our programs are a positive place to come and work. And so we are proposing some things to really focus on the wellness of and overall well-being of our staff. We are first proposing that programs must promote this culture of wellness and empowerment for staff in programs. We are proposing that all staff must receive regularly scheduled breaks as part of their workday. We are proposing that classroom staff in particular must have access to what we are calling brief unscheduled wellness breaks of about 5 minutes. So if a staff member, for instance, in the classroom is feeling a moment of extreme overwhelm, they have this opportunity to safely to step out of the classroom for a few minutes, regroup, and then return to the children. And we talk about programs having a plan to provide this in a way that still promotes the safety of children. And we are proposing that classroom staff should have access to adult-sized furniture in classrooms to really support their physical health as well. And for in the space of employee engagement, we make some updates to really focus on a management style for staff that is less top-down driven and more of that two-way responsive interaction between managers and staff that really values and listens to employee feedback and tries to think about those barriers to job performance and rectify those. All right, so I'm going to move to our next bucket in the space of supporting the mental health of children, families, and staff. So our goal with these changes is really to think about how we are integrating mental health more holistically across everything that our programs do. So first, we are proposing that programs must establish what we are calling a multidisciplinary mental health team. And this multidisciplinary team would be responsible for a number of things in the program, and a particular note of coordinating program-wide mental health supports for children, families, and staff. We are also proposing some changes to strengthen mental health consultation, which Head Start programs are required to provide. We are proposing changes here to clarify that the purpose of mental health consultation is to really support the adults in the program, to really help them understand how they support children's mental health in the program. And we're also proposing to clarify that programs could work with mental health consultants that are not yet licensed if they work under a licensed mental health professional in the program. We are also proposing language changes throughout to better and more intentionally connect mental health with other program services that programs provide, such as integrating mental health more intentionally into what our programs do for our families and what they're providing to our expectant families. We are also proposing more proactive approaches to screening for mental health concerns and follow-up for children. And we propose more clarity around our requirements for suspension and expulsion, including clear definitions for these terms that we're proposing. And so next I'm going to turn to the last bucket of quality improvements that we are proposing. So this collectively, this last bucket, we really think of as a set of changes that are about helping Head Start programs effectively and equitably meet those needs of communities and families that they are serving and improving the quality of the services. So first, I'm going to talk about what we are proposing related to services for families and our family service workers in particular. So we are proposing that for family service workers, we establish a maximum caseload of no more than 40 families per family service worker. And the goal of that change, right now, a number of our family service workers have many more families than that assigned to them. So the goal of this change is really to let that family service worker be able to provide those high quality, individualized, responsive services to the families that they are assigned to work with. Next, we propose a number of changes to enhance the services for expectant families. And so what we are proposing here is, again, to really try to ensure those services are responsive to the needs of this population that our programs serve. So we have some requirements around clear tracking and reporting of these services, so we in the Office of Head Start can better understand what types of services our programs are providing to these families. We also propose some changes to clarify the intent of the newborn visit and for these families and the use of an appropriate curriculum with these families if programs are using one. And we propose a new standard in this space to really ask programs to do their part to help address what we know exists, the racial and ethnic disparities in pre- and postnatal outcomes for expectant families. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about some changes related to community assessment as well as things related to eligibility and identifying families for programs and enrollment and attendance. So when it comes to the community assessment for Head Start, this is really a foundational part of programs understanding what their community needs and how they should design their program to be responsive to those needs and the families that may be eligible for and enrolling in their program. But we also know the community assessment process can be very burdensome for our programs, that they're collecting oftentimes way more data than they need, not quite sure how to use it. So we propose a number of changes to reorganize and streamline this section of our standards to hopefully reduce burden of the community assessment process, help programs more strategically plan for how they're going to conduct that process, think more carefully about what data do they actually need to collect, think about how they could leverage existing data, and then also a particular note, right now we require this annual update to the community assessment. We're proposing that the annual update only be done if the program determines that it's needed, if there's been a shift in the community that could affect their program. We are proposing, we know that a number of our families that might be eligible for Head Start or identified don't actually end up enrolling in the program, and we know that some that enroll then don't have great attendance. So we propose some changes in this space to help programs, ask programs to think more intentionally about what are those barriers. Why are some children enrolling or not enrolling that are eligible? Why are some children that enroll then not attending? Taking a look at those barriers, and we call out transportation as a particular possible barrier. And we ask programs to resolve those barriers if feasible, and specifically we ask programs to consider providing transportation if it's an identified barrier if feasible. And then next I'm going to talk about a couple of changes related to eligibility for families. So one that's kind of straightforward, our definition of income that programs have to use for determining a family's income for eligibility has often been kind of cumbersome and confusing. So we are proposing a much more straightforward definition that gives a finite list of these are all the things that have to be considered income. And so now this helps you understand how you would calculate what is a family's income. And then another one, we've been getting a lot of positive feedback in webinars so far on this one, is a proposal that programs could, as part of eligibility determination, adjust for high costs of living. So we know that in some areas of the country, housing costs are just extremely high. And so a family that is paying a large chunk of their income into housing might still effectively be in poverty. And so with this proposal, we are saying that if a family pays more than 30% of their income towards housing, that excess above 30% could be deducted from their total income, and then what's left is what the program could look at to determine now, is this family eligible for Head Start based on what they're earning. And I'm going to talk, I know I'm out of time, so I'm going to try to go a little bit faster through the last few things. We are proposing some quality improvements for child health and safety. So we're proposing some new standards for programs to test for lead in the water and paint of their Head Start facilities. And we are also proposing to strengthen some requirements that helps to both mitigate and then respond if there are safety incidents in programs. I'm going to have to run through these last ones a little faster. We are also proposing more clarifications for service duration for early Head Start, and saying here that our early Head Start center base, which has to provide 1,380 hours annually of service, that must be across at least 46 weeks per year. It's always been our intention that early Head Start services should be full day year-round. And we are making some clarifications to family-child care ratios, which have often been hard to interpret in our standards, as well as clarifying the requirements for family-child care providers in that setting. And then the last couple of things, we are proposing to formalize what has often been common practice when it comes to definitions of our standards. So first, that the term Head Start would now refer to the entire birth to 5 program. That we want to establish a new term, Head Start Preschool, that would refer to those services to children ages 3 to school entry. And then early Head Start would, as it always has, refer to services birth to age 3. And this section, by the way, is open for public comment. There is some other communications that this was not open for public comment. I just want to clarify this is, if you wanted to comment on these definitions. Then the last thing I want to mention here in our proposals is we are proposing some requirements to really update and modernize the way our programs must engage with families to help them learn about Head Start, to help them enroll in Head Start, really reduce burden on families to get into the Head Start program, and think about the diverse language types, diverse ability types of families when you're doing that communication. Okay, so my last slide, I just again want to encourage folks to comment on the NPRM, on our proposals. We are so excited about what we have here. We have until January 19th to comment. That QR code will take you to a landing page on our Early Childhood Learning and Knowledge, or ECLIC, website with a whole lot of resources on the NPRM. If you don't want to read the whole long 250-page preamble, you can take a look at some of we have short fact sheets, topical summaries. We have some recorded webinars with our director, Kari Garvin, and also our Associate Deputy Shauna Pinkney going over the changes in detail. We have short videos with Kari really encouraging comment for program staff and for families that can be shared out, and some other resources. Oh, and another one we're very proud of, track change version of our current standards. So you can see our collective standards and easily see what we're proposing to change if you like to look at it that way. And so with that, I will, I think, turn it back to Katie. Thank you.
All right, thank you for sticking with us. We did a deep dive, but all really important changes that I think really demonstrate how we're trying to move the ball forward on those priorities that we shared across Head Start and childcare, albeit with some kind of different approaches given the scope and the design of the programs. So we do have a couple minutes for questions. There's a microphone over there and over there. So if you have a question or a comment, please make your way to the microphone. We'd love to hear from you. I will caveat that when it comes to proposed regulations, we are only allowed to share what's in the regulation. So we're happy to take your questions and comments, and we'll answer the best we can. The other disclaimer I will give is we can only consider comments that we get in the Federal Register. So if you say it today, you also have to go to the Federal Register and put your comment in so we can consider it. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this falls in line with acceptable questions, but big picture, I heard a lot about mental health and well-being, and then in the larger proposed rules, I didn't see much in the mental health space, and I'm just really curious. Those are super exciting, progressive, economic-focused strategies, both for the continuity and stability of the child care provider, as well as families. But I, of course, am going to like, well, if we don't address suspensions and expulsions, then those families, despite having payments, may still be changing their child care setting. If we aren't looking at trauma-informed care or mental health on a larger scale, what does that mean? The child care provider as an entity might be stable, but you still have workforce turnover. So that relationship, that stable, early, predictable continuity of care hasn't quite been addressed. And I was just wondering if there's like a forecast for, I know all this takes decades, and I appreciate what is up there. It is huge. And I'm curious, like, what's 2.0 and 3.0?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think one of the things we're certainly hearing about is kind of the interrelatedness between the workforce challenges we're seeing and the increase in mental health needs that we're seeing in the child population, and the inability to have the right mental health supports for adults and children is leading to more turnover, and it's leading to more challenges kind of filling some of those roles. We in the federal government are bound by, we have to regulate kind of within the bounds of our statute. So in Head Start, mental health is very much an affirmative part of the program, and it is already required. What we are doing is kind of taking it up a notch even further. And so Lindsay had a lot of ground to cover, but there is a really robust proposal around this multidisciplinary mental health team in the NPRM. So definitely encourage you to look at it and comment if there are things that we could do above and beyond. In childcare, states have a great deal of flexibility when it comes to how they design their programs. And what we're putting in place is kind of the minimum requirement that you have to meet from the federal government's perspective. But that in no way precludes states from taking a look at suspensions and expulsions and what requirements they might want to put in place, or looking at their quality dollars and how you might use those to address mental health for adults and children. There's not necessarily a federal requirement around mental health in the child care subsidy program. That doesn't mean that we don't think it's incredibly important, that we aren't looking at ways to provide more TA, and that we don't strongly support states using that flexibility to address some of the concerns that are emerging. Thank you for your question. Does anyone else want to add? Okay.
Hi, we have a question from an online participant.
Great.
Is there anything to advance Head Start standards to engage families and ensure they receive developmental assessments and well visits by being connected to a primary care provider?
That's a great question. What Lindsay covered in the presentation are the changes that we would add on top of the existing standards. So a lot of what that questioner mentioned, I think, are covered and required. But Lindsay, I'll see if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I don't know. This doesn't seem to be on. It's on now? Okay. Our current Head Start standards do require that the programs ensure our families have a medical home, a dental home, and the child is getting those well visits and up to date on their required immunizations and things like that. And so we aren't proposing a change specifically to that, but we are proposing changes that I think could help with that, such as, making sure you're engaging with families in a way that really works for them, that in languages they understand, based on the family's ability. So I think that could help, but we aren't proposing a change specific to that standard, but that is an existing requirement.
All right, maybe one more. Yep, maybe one more question, and then we'll see we're losing people quickly.
I was just curious if along with the proposed rules, there comes sort of a expectation of cost to maintain service levels, because I love these. They're, as Lisa said, super progressive, and I'm really excited about them. And I'm thinking, if this doesn't come along with that $600 billion investment, what it means is we're going to serve potentially less children better, which is a fine goal too. But I just, to the extent that states could help support programs to make up that gap, just curious if there's any kind of costing out, I guess, state by state that comes along with the proposal.
So there is a costing out. In each of our NPRMs, there's a section called the regulatory impact analysis. It's super fun. Go read it. Maybe we could title it better so people wanted to read it. But that section explains kind of the costs and what the impact might be of each of these regulations. And we were very mindful of how we balance new requirements, continuing to call on Congress to fund these programs at a higher level, but not having the assurance that that money was coming. So the analysis that we have done shows that there'll be pretty minimal impact in terms of the number of children served. One of the main drivers of that is in Head Start, we are in this position where programs tell us they have waiting lists, but they have closed classrooms because they can't find qualified teachers. So we aren't serving the number of children in Head Start that in theory we should be able to. And we're in this cycle where we can't open classrooms because we aren't paying the wages, and we can't serve the kids because we don't have teachers. So what we're really proposing to do with this rule is find a path forward for Head Start that is sustainable. And that does mean looking at the number of children we have. We are serving 650,000 children roughly in Head Start today. And what this rule would do is look at that 650 as kind of the new service level in Head Start. So if you look at that level, we can implement much of this with roughly the same number of children. I would argue that Head Start has never been funded at the level it needs to provide the level of quality we want. And the Head Start staff have essentially subsidized Head Start by accepting low wages. And in a tight labor market that seems to be here to stay, we don't have a sustainable path forward without making some big changes. And we hope that it comes along with money that allows us to grow the program over time. But at this point, it's really important that we get those kind of fundamental pieces in place, and that we have wages that will allow us to attract, retain the qualified workforce, and deliver the gold standard of early childhood education that the program is known for. All right. Can I do one thing, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thanks. Before we go, I said earlier that it is rare to have flexible money in early childhood that allows you to think big and innovate and test things, and do things you might otherwise not be able to do. It is really, really, really important that people know what that money is doing in your state. I know there was a session on telling your story. Mm-hmm. I cannot emphasize enough how much we need more people to know what PDG is doing in your states, the impacts it's having, the innovations it's supporting, how it's impacting children and families because you're able to do things you otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So I want to just I know we're low on time and people have flights to catch, but can we take 30 seconds? You all did a session on how to tell your story. Everybody is overwhelmed. The holidays are coming up, but I want you to think of one thing that you can go home and do, whether that is creating one slide, creating 3 talking points, picking up the phone and calling one person and telling them this is what PDG is doing in our state. Think about that one action you can take that you can commit to today. Turn to your neighbor, tell them what that action is going to be. Take just a minute, tell them what it's going to be. Yeah.
I can reach it.
Okay.
Oops.
I didn't even see the timetable.
I think you were fine. I think you were within she had 5 minutes up, so I think
All right. I'm glad to hear chatter. Is there anyone who wants to shout out maybe one idea from their table? Anybody want to share just one idea? People are still talking. All right. All right. I'm glad to hear the chatter. Keep it going, but we gotta wrap this up, unfortunately. Keep the conversations going, though. All right. I see the Idaho table. Beth, what's your one idea? Yeah.
Well, so in our state, I can't actually say the words PDG.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Katie, for calling on me. We literally cannot say PDG. We call it the Idaho School Readiness Project.
Okay, fair.
But one of the things that we're going to do a better job of is, while we can't say, hey, PDG is doing this in our state, what we can do is share the work. You know, we can talk about the activities within the grant and just, it's you know, let's just do the work. We don't have to talk about the project, let's just do the work. So we'll do a better job of sharing the stories of the individual activities and how they're connected.
All right. In other states, we do want you to say PDG. In Idaho,
when you can talk about PDG and actually say those words out
waiver.
loud, that's a true story.
Is there one more table that maybe wants to share just the kind of one thing that they're doing?
Okay. She's grabbing the mic.
She's making me talk.
Thank you, Scarlett.
I just shared with her that, you know, we had the original first PDG grant, didn't get the second, and now we're in the renewal. But one thing we've learned, making sure that we're being transparent about how we're spending the funds. We're building out our website to be better than it was before, but also already planning ahead, even though we haven't even gotten hardly started, but planning ahead of how we're going to report all these things and make sure we have a very good, detailed final report of what we're doing so that we can share with stakeholders and tell the story. Yep. Because to get legislators to buy in and those things, it's very important that you tell the story of what we use the funding for and how we can continue if we have it or don't have it.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all so much for doing that. I know it's easy to get on the plane and forget it, but please do that one thing. We really need help spreading the word, and we need to show our work and what PDG is doing. And my last plea is please spend your money. When you have a lot of balances, it makes people think you don't need it. Right. And we know that you all need early childhood money. We tell you tell us all the time how precious these resources are. So make sure you are making plans for that money, that you're getting it out. We know the providers, the children, and the families need those resources ASAP. So get that money out. You know, we'll do carryovers, but we prefer that those resources get out given the need in the community right now. All right, so I will wrap it up and turn it over to Richard to take us home.
So first, applause for our panel. Thank you very much. So you heard me in the opening session talk about the importance of just letting someone else know you appreciate them and the value they bring to the work that we're doing. So I want to start by just appreciating our PDG TA Center staff, all of the staff. I want to again appreciate the convening planning committee because you guys put all this together and all we've been hearing is positive stuff, so thank you. But I also mentioned that there are people behind the scenes. I told you when I was in the program how we did awards for quiet contribution. Well, there's there's a lot of staff of PDG who you didn't even meet, right? The people in the background who are doing the logistics support. The wonderful staff here at the hotel who've made sure that all of our technology has worked all the time. Our photographer who's been taking pictures like nonstop. Right? We have the people who've been doing registration and the people who've been at the hotel who checked you in, checked you out, cleaning your rooms. All these people who definitely don't get acknowledged, but they need to be acknowledged. So because the success of the conference is based on all the things that make it easier for you to come and participate, and including all the people back home who could not be here today, but who have supported your ability to be here and are doing the work quietly and in ways that we never know. So congratulations and thank you to everybody back home. Okay, so just a couple of quick things. One, you're going to hear me say again, if you haven't completed your evaluations, you know, you can do so here before you leave. You can open up your Hoover app right now and just kind of do it. There is actually an additional overall event evaluation. You'll see it under the survey section under additional resources. If you're going to be here a few more minutes, open it up, do it, finish it, get it out. If you didn't do a workshop evaluation from yesterday, you can still go back and do that. We really need to hear your feedback because we really need to understand what we need to do differently or what we need to do more of and how to make this even better the next time we go about doing it. Okay. We have extra materials, extra bags and notebooks in the registration area. Feel free to take them with you. Share them with partners back home if you want. Please share your action plans with your TA specialists and your federal project officers so we can continue to support your work as you go on. Those of you who need to do needs assessments, they need to be in by December 13th, and we are planning a follow-up webinar to help you keep going with your planning in January. So thank you very much. Continue the great work you're doing. We were so happy to hear all the wonderful things you've done, and we want to keep hearing them. So thank you. Have a wonderful and safe trip back home. Thank you.